Okay, seniors. So here we're dealing with the Vicksburg campaigns, and the Union victory at Vicksburg in the summer of 1863 would be the most important strategic victory for the North. Okay, it would cut the Confederacy in two halves, East and West. Okay, and it would make the West, Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas, really unable to communicate or get supplies back and forth to the East. Okay. It would also allow the Union to gain control of central Mississippi and thus start moving through the deep South toward the coast. Okay, it's a huge turning point for the war, the Vicksburg campaign of 1862 and 3. So before we start dealing with the lecture, let's just look at the map and resituate ourselves in the Western theater of conflict. Okay, last we talked about in the West how Grant had victories at Henry and Donaldson that allowed him to begin the invasion of the South. The massing of armies around the border of Tennessee and Mississippi here on the Tennessee River led to the catastrophic Battle of Shiloh, which committed Grant to a policy of total war, that is, full commitment of resources to the war effort. That was followed by the fall of Memphis. Okay, Grant takes Memphis. Simultaneously, David Farragut takes New Orleans. Okay, so most of the Mississippi is fallen to the Union. Most of the smaller forts also collapse in the aftermath of the Battle of Shiloh in the summer and autumn of 1862. Okay, in fact, by the summer, there's only a few places left on the river that are fortified by the South, and the only significant one is here at Vicksburg. So the Union control of the Mississippi depends on the Union capture of this city, Vicksburg. Okay, so just take a moment to look here. Here is Memphis. That's where Grant is headquartered in the winter of 1862 into 1863. Okay. Here is New Orleans, which has fallen to the Union as well by summer of 1862. All right, and here's Vicksburg in between. All right, Grant is going to have a really hard time all through this winter moving down towards Vicksburg. Close to Vicksburg is the capital of Mississippi, Jackson, right here. So Vicksburg, Jackson. There are going to be two Confederate armies, one at Jackson and one at Vicksburg, that Grant has to contend with. Okay, so just keep in mind this is the overall geographic context in which these campaigns at Vicksburg are taking place here in the Western Theater. All right, hang on. I'll be right back. All right, seniors. So the Vicksburg campaign, the one that is going to be successful, is from April to July of 1863. Now, in that winter of 1862 into 1863, there are two separate campaigns, two separate attempts by Grant to move from Memphis down towards Vicksburg and take it. Both of these attempts are unsuccessful. Both of these attempts involve coordinated efforts by various divisions under various generals to get at Vicksburg from different angles, and they all fail. Why is Vicksburg so hard to get to? Okay, well, part of it we can attribute to the success of the rebel cavalry. Okay, so again, rebel cavalry tends to be more skilled than the Union, although that will not be the case in this campaign, ultimately, as we'll see. But initially, the rebel cavalry is influential. Okay, two guys in particular, Nathan Bedford Forrest and Earl Van Dorn, are successful at cutting the Union off from their supplies. Okay, and what this does is it forces Grant to retreat back up to Tennessee. And what he does when he's back in Tennessee is Grant realizes that his men can live off the land. Okay, that's what he decides to do that. Basically, you're going to confiscate food in the South to feed your soldiers. He decides he's going to do that, and that's going to make the difference for the Union going forward. They're not going to need to maintain supply lines for food. They will need them for ammunition and so forth, but not for food, and that will make a big difference for them to move quickly through the South. Okay. But initially, rebel cavalry prevent one of these attempts. The other thing to keep in mind about this is the geography and the topography and the weather in Mississippi. Okay, first of all, this is confusing probably to you, but this here is the Mississippi River, okay? Mississippi River here. This little square represents the city of Vicksburg, okay? Look at where it is situated on the Mississippi River. It's situated on this tight bend in the river, okay? What this does is it makes it very difficult for the Union to move quickly downriver in ships, okay? They've got to contend with this difficult bend in the river, and it's difficult to navigate here, okay? The other problem is that the city of Vicksburg is situated on a hillside, very, very high, very, very steep hillside running up from the river, okay? So there are defensive cannons set all along the river here at Vicksburg. Any ships coming downriver here are visible to the cannons from far away and fall under vulnerability of cannon fire. And so it's almost impossible, seemingly, to get ships past Vicksburg. That's the central problem that the Union faces. So initially, they're always trying to go around Vicksburg, okay? They try to build, you see how the Mississippi River moves and curls back around itself and so on and so forth. The Union initially tries to build canals in between these places in the river to try to get south of Vicksburg. Fail to do it. It's too difficult, okay? Another route they try to take is from the north, from Memphis down through Mississippi. The problem is they're coming down the Yazoo River. It's full of swamps, okay? And there's snakes and there's other horrible things. And furthermore, it's very difficult to get ships through. The water's not always necessarily deep enough for the transport ships. But furthermore, there's all sorts of trees hanging over into the swamps, into the rivers. It's very difficult to move through. So the terrain, the geography is also difficult. And furthermore, the weather is bad for them, and you've got lots of rain. And as soldiers are moving south in these first two campaigns in the winter, a lot of them are getting sick and dying. Okay, so pretty unsuccessful attempts here in the winter of 1862-3. All right. Now, the breakthrough then comes in April. In April of 1863, you have the beginning of this third and successful Vicksburg campaign. Okay? Now, what happens? What makes the difference? All right. The Union Navy does something very bold, does something very risky. They decide they're going to do what's called running the gauntlet. They're just going to try to get past the Confederate guns and hope for the best. Okay? The Confederates on April 16th have gotten a little cocky, and they're having a big gala ball in the city of Vicksburg. Okay? All the important citizens are still living there. They feel very confident. The city's not going to fall. They feel very confident. Grant, on the other hand, knows he just has to keep trying. He's not going to give up. Eventually, he's going to get the city, okay? So on the night of April 16th, the guns on the hillside of Vicksburg erupt and interrupt the gala that the people are going to, the ball or whatever that they're having. And what's happening is that the Union ships are coming past the city. And you had 3 transport ships, which are used to move soldiers from place to place, and 8 gunboats, which are used for naval warfare. All 8 of the gunboats make it, and 2 of the 3 transport ships make it. A few nights later, they run the gauntlet again, and more ships make it through. This time, 5 of 6 transport ships make it through. So the Navy, the Union Navy, successfully, most of it, makes it past Vicksburg. And this is the key thing. Why? Because that means the Union soldiers, who at the same time have been marching south now. So these lines, these blue lines represent Grant coming down from Memphis. Here he comes, Grant, all the way down along the river. They can now rendezvous south of Vicksburg with the ships that move past it. Those ships will be able to carry the soldiers across the river. Okay. Now, in order for this to work, Grant needs some diversionary tactics. Okay. Okay. So, two fellows, Benjamin Grierson, here's the last name, Grierson, Benjamin Grierson, and William Tecumseh Sherman, who we've encountered before, are going to provide Grant with two diversionary feints that will distract the Confederate Army here at Vicksburg and allow Grant to move his soldiers across the river. Okay? Benjamin Grierson is a cavalry officer, and he conducts one of the most spectacular and daring cavalry raids all throughout Mississippi in order to draw Union attention away from Grant crossing the river down here south of Vicksburg. Okay? And Grierson is, I forget how many miles he goes. Anyway, he, for 2 weeks in April, he's moving across back and forth throughout Mississippi, cutting railroad ties, cutting roads, disrupting supply lines, causing havoc, essentially, okay? And he goes 600 miles in 16 days of travel. Very impressive, and he does it in enemy territory. So a lot of the Confederate cavalry maneuvers that were very impressive, both in the West and in the East, they're being done in friendly territory. Grierson here is doing something just as impressive or more impressive, and he's doing it in enemy territory. So he's very skilled, very, very skilled. At the same time, Sherman here, he's come down with Grant from Memphis. Grant sends him on a diversionary feint along the Yazoo River. And the Confederate commander in charge of Vicksburg, a guy named Pemberton, sends troops after it takes the bait, okay? Once Sherman has gone on this feint, he kind of turns around, goes back, rejoins Grant, catches up with Grant, and crosses down here, okay, with the rest of the army. He's kind of following behind Grant, all right? And they get everybody over here, and they get into Mississippi, south of Vicksburg. It's successful, okay? Okay, the next element of the Vicksburg campaign, Grant is going to march to Jackson rather than Vicksburg. So Grant crosses down here south of Vicksburg. Rather than go right up here to Vicksburg, he marches all the way around here to the capital of Mississippi, Jackson. Okay, why does he go to Jackson? All right, well, there's two different armies here in the area. One is defending Jackson under a guy named Joseph E. Johnston. The other is defending Vicksburg under Pemberton, a guy named Pemberton. Okay? Grant wants to prevent Johnston, the Confederate guy in Jackson, from meeting up with Pemberton. So he goes to Jackson to try to prevent that from happening and defeat the smaller force that Johnston has in Jackson. And then his plan is to go immediately to Vicksburg, okay? Now, at this point, Grant is living off the land. His soldiers are seizing food. A lot of food is not being bought because it's too expensive at this point for a lot of Confederate people to afford. The Union soldiers don't have that problem. They just take it. The plantations also in this area are very, very wealthy. So Grant is able to seize a lot of livestock and food from those places as well. So the soldiers are doing well, and they're moving incredibly quickly, and Johnston is basically blindsided, okay? And so by May 9th, okay, Grant is with about 25,000 men is outside of Jackson, okay? Now, Johnston retreats north out of the city, leaving Jackson to Grant. Sherman comes in, burns a whole bunch of the railroad depots and so on and so forth, other facilities that are useful to the Confederate Army in Jackson, okay? Hang on. Okay, so Johnston, this Confederate guy over here, has sent word to his colleague over here, Pemberton in Vicksburg, to send some troops to help him out. Pemberton sends a group, that's this red line here, coming out of Vicksburg to try to meet Grant in battle. He doesn't send all of his soldiers, but he sends some of them. And they meet up at this battle here, the Battle of Champions Hill. This is the biggest and the key battle of the whole Vicksburg campaign, Champions Hill. It is a Union victory, and the Confederates have to go on a retreat. That's this dotted line here. There's another brief battle here at this river, Big Black River it's called, and then the Confederates continue their retreat back behind their defenses here at Vicksburg, okay? So this blue line is Grant coming out of Jackson to meet the Confederates at Champion Hill, defeating them, pursuing them. Second battle here at Big Black River, and then breaking off into different branches to attack the enemy line at different points, okay? You see this line here is Sherman coming up this way, all right? Okay, so Grant has done something very remarkable by the time the Battle of Champions Hill is over. He has traveled, how many miles? 180 miles. He's fought in 5 battles. He's won all of them. He's inflicted 7,200 casualties on the enemy, and he's got 4,300 casualties that he's lost. Okay, the bottom line of that is he's done something really, really impressive, okay? That's the bottom line there. Now, he makes 2 attempts to take the city right away as soon as he's followed the retreating army back to Vicksburg, okay? So the soldiers come back, the Confederate soldiers come back into the city, and they look, the citizens are looking at their faces, and they're like, can't believe their expressions. They're so exhausted and defeated looking. Okay, Grant makes 2 attempts, May 19th and May 20th, to attack the city. They both fail. The defenses are too strong, and so then Grant settles in for a siege here outside of Vicksburg, okay? Now, there's this other army in the area, this Johnson guy that came out of Jackson. Grant sends Sherman back over here with a few guys to build up a defense along here, along the Big Black River, and to keep Johnson in place. And Johnston never makes an attempt to attack, never makes an attempt to help the other army here in Vicksburg, okay? All right, so the final element of the Vicksburg campaign is the siege of the city, siege of Vicksburg, which goes on from May 22nd to July 4th, okay? So what does this mean? Obviously, well, a siege, what do you do? Of course, you cut off supplies to the city so that you're trying to starve them out, okay? The other thing you're doing is you're bombarding them daily with cannon, okay, trying to break the spirit, okay? Now, again, most of the cannon is landing outside of the city in the defenses of the rebel troops, okay? But a lot of it is also landing inside the city because they can't control the cannon's trajectory very well. So this is a very dangerous situation for the civilians that live in Vicksburg. So they leave their homes, and remember I said that Vicksburg is built on a hillside. It's very steep moving up from the river. So the civilians dig into caves on the side of the hill all around Vicksburg. A lot of them looking towards the river, but also in other hillsides that are available to them. Okay, because it's not safe to live in their homes. Okay, now they're all running out of food. They're all under heavy fire. It's a very bad situation for the Confederates. The commander of the Confederates in Vicksburg, the Pemberton guy, smuggles a letter out to Johnston and tells him, look, I'll hold on as long as I can, but it's not going to work. I need reinforcements. The only way to keep this city, the only way to save it, is to send reinforcements. Okay, Pemberton, he's like lost all morale. He's not going to attack. And so nothing happens on his end. He's got about 6,000 guys versus like 30,000 or so that Pemberton's got here. Now, the other problem is that there are no more reinforcements to send, okay? A few guys try to come up from Louisiana, but they get stopped by Union troops in another minor battle. Some of those guys are black soldiers fighting for the first time, or one of the first times they've been in fighting. Those particular soldiers. And then, but the problem is there's no reinforcements for Vicksburg precisely because the president of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis, and Robert E. Lee are at the same time as this is happening, committing most of their resources to the invasion of Pennsylvania. So the Eastern theater of conflict, particularly Lee's invasion of Pennsylvania, deprives Vicksburg of any reinforcements to come from the East, okay? And so there's nobody to send. No reinforcements for Vicksburg. Very important point. No reinforcements for Vicksburg. And so it's only a matter of time before the city has to give up. Okay. Now the Union, they are trying to tunnel under the rebel defenses and place explosives underneath the rebel defenses. And there's two big explosions, June 25th and then July 1st, okay, in the rebel line. And then the Union tries to take the line and so on and so forth. They're not able to break through, okay, but the issue is starvation. Pemberton does not have food to feed his soldiers or all the civilians, okay? So the soldiers are starving, they're starting to starve to death, and they tell Pemberton, the Confederate soldiers tell Pemberton, look, if you can't feed us, then you should surrender, okay? So finally, Pemberton says, look, we can't go on like this. He asks Grant for terms of surrender on July 3rd. Grant insists on unconditional surrender. So the next day, July 4th, 1863, Independence Day, the white flag rises above the city hall in Vicksburg, and the city surrenders, okay? So 4th of July, the Union marches victoriously into the city of Vicksburg. And this last significant point on the Mississippi River has fallen to the Union. The whole river now, basically, within a few weeks after Vicksburg, is completely in Union control, okay? Lincoln recognizes that Grant is the general that he has been waiting for, okay? And he makes this famous phrase, Grant is the man for me. There is no other general that I can trust. He's the guy. So he's going to bring Grant east after Vicksburg, and he's going to pit him against Lee in the final phases of the war, okay? All right.